Traders, how are you? With Marcello. Today we're doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week. We have cyber attacks now going on with food companies. We have food companies saying that they're going to continue increasing the prices because it's hurting their bottom line. We also have an absolutely egregious hazmat situation, hazardous materials situation all over the United States, and some conspiracy theories that we need to talk about. Overall, the U.S. indexes this week had the worst session of the year on Tuesday, the worst day of the year so far. Overall, for the week, the U.S. markets are negative, including those of Canada. We had a situation this week where basically there was very good economic data, especially in the job front. So the amount of people that were requesting unemployment benefits actually dropped instead of going up. And what that indicates is, well, the economy's been doing great. People are, they can go out and find a job, no problem. So that creates the fear that the central bank in the United States is going to continue to increase rates. If they're going to continue to increase rates, the expectation of the economy goes down because obviously it's going to put the brakes on everything, considering that the United States economy is about close to 70%, 70 consumer spending. If they raise interest rates, people can afford less houses, less cars. Everybody's buying things on credit nowadays as well, since the personal debt level in the United States is reaching record levels. So that's basically what happened this week. So the first thing, I didn't know where to put this. Maybe I'll start a new, since it seems that we're having a toxic situation every other week now. If you guys look at this map, share it, Esteban or Michael. The map shows you the picture of all the hazmat situations in the United States. And I don't know about you guys, I've been in this industry now for close to 23 years next year, and I'm kind of trained to see patterns, right? I've never seen something like this before where there's so many accidents over and over again. And I don't know if you guys have been noticing as well the amount of earthquakes. Have you guys been noticing that they've kind of been increasing, volcanoes going off? They don't show that as much on the mainstream media, but something just doesn't seem right. And speaking of not seeming right, there's a local farmer that sounded the alarm in the city of East Palestine, Ohio, where that toxic plume of air happened after the train derailment with that toxic material. They being the government, launched what's called the My ID emergency service to surveil biometrics 1 week before the Ohio train derailment. So this farmer is saying, hey, wait a second. Why did you just start this service right before the actual accident happened? I mean, it's kind of questionable, isn't it? And on top of that, speaking of conspiracies, the Biden regime is negotiating a legally binding agreement to give the World Health Organization full authority over the U.S. pandemic policies. No Senate or Congress approval needed because they did such a great job last time. Overseas market news, the European markets were mostly lower. The Latin American markets were mostly lower as well. Africa and the Middle East, South Africa and Saudi Arabia were the biggest losers there. And in the far, far east, we have another week where the Hang Seng was the biggest loser of all in the far, far east. Most of those markets were negative. Bitcoin and other cryptocurrency news. Sam Bankman-Fried was charged with conspiracy to make unlawful political donations and defraud federal election commissions. The SEC and the New York's top financial regulatory agency is opposing the purchase of Voyager of $1 billion by Binance. So they're basically saying that Voyager may have unregistered offices in the United States, which violates the law, and also the sale of securities, unregistered securities, which is illegal in the United States as well. So basically, you can see that the regulation is starting to get a little bit more strict when it comes to the crypto space. Overall, for the week, Bitcoin was also lower. It went down 6.18%. Again, I accidentally deleted the final price, so you guys will have to, sorry about that. I'll make sure I won't do that next week. But it started at about 24,500 and it went down 6.18%, if you guys can do the math in your head. Commodities, Dole Food Company had a cyber attack where it stopped all of their North American production. They just shut it down. And remember that the WEF, the World Economic Forum, was predicting that there's going to be a massive global cyber attack. So looks like that's getting on its way. Remember that Dole Food is one of the largest producers of fruit and vegetables in the world. And speaking of food companies, Nestle, which is the world's largest food corporation, said that prices of staple items are going to continue to grow in 2023. They increased prices by 8.2% last year, but this wasn't enough to offset their own costs, and it substantially dented their profits. Wow. Chinese rushing to sign new long-term liquefied natural gas deals to let them control the global market. Right now, they control about 15% of the global market, but they are trying to continue to increase that market share because basically what they do is they buy it and then they resell it to the highest bidder and they make money in the middle. Like everything is usual nowadays, China is going to run the world probably in a few years. U.S. crude and Brent. U.S. crude was down 0.02% to 76.32. Brent, which is the international oil, went up 0.19% to 83.16. Gold prices ended in their fifth week in negative territory. This has to do with the fact that we have persistent inflation and also what I mentioned to you guys about the jobs report and the expectation with the interest rates. If the jobs report came out great and there's less people that are requesting unemployment benefits, and on top of that, we have a situation where inflation, remember, went up, it didn't go down. There's a lot higher likelihood that the central bank in the United States is going to increase rates, which means that more people are going to buy the dollar, which increases the value of the dollar, which means that everything that's listed in dollars actually goes down, being a lot of commodities like gold, silver, oil, etc. Gold for the week went down 1.71% to 1812. Silver went down over 4.5% to 2086. And in financial and banking news, Discover, the credit card company, if you guys don't know what that is internationally, it's very similar to Visa and MasterCard. They're going to begin tracking purchases at gun retailers starting in April. And they're also having to report that they're going to have the double amount of charge-offs in 2023 that they had in 2022, meaning that consumers can't pay back the debts that they racked up, so they have to just forgive the debt. They sell it to these other collection agencies, and that's hitting a multi-year high and hitting the U.S. consumer. Obviously, the inflation is hitting people really, really hard. Tax refund season is off to a low start. The total payments are down 30% from the 2017 to 2019 average. This hits the consumer a lot as well because a lot of people use that money to go out and buy things. They're probably going out to buy food at this point because it's so expensive. And remember that the economy in the U.S., this is an important number because just like the spending in Christmas or Thanksgiving is important, these refunds, normally people go out and spend money on on holidays and TVs, and they go out and buy things. And the economy in the United States is almost 70% consumer spending. Emojis now mean financial advice. There was a lawsuit where the rocket ship emoji, the stock chart emoji, and the money bags emoji can be financial advice, considering that it's considered a financial return on investment. But the senators and Congress people, they can do insider trading all they want. But you don't be posting poop emojis because it's financial advice. Inflation in Australia went up 32-year high to 7.8%. They raised the rates, the central bank, to a decade high of 3.35%. They're starting to get concerned about the risk of not being able to contain inflation. It's actually common sense here, guys. If your inflation is at 7.8% and your rates are at 3.35, that difference between the two is going to do nothing. Interest rates actually have to be above the inflation rate to cool down the inflation. The Labor Department is reporting that the cost of food consumed in U.S. homes has gone up 11.3% in January from a year earlier. Now, I always tell you guys a story. Some of you guys catch on, and thank you, the guys, for leaving the comments of how much your food bills have gone up. I went to Five Guys during the pandemic in 2020, and it was about $20, max $24 for two people, two fries, two burgers. And now the last time that I went, which was in the same area, right? It wasn't like I was going to Cincinnati or a poor. Cincinnati isn't poor, but it's not like I was going to a lower cost living state or anything compared to New York or something like that. I literally went in the same area, and now instead of it costing $20, $24 max for two people, it was $20 just for me, for one person. So when they tell us that the inflation rate is 11%, it's actually a lot higher than that, right? Because if it doubled on me in 2 years, it means that the inflation rate for food is 50%. 0.50%. The political news, there were deaths of scientists in East Palestine, Ohio, that were on a plane that accidentally crashed. They worked for the company that was going to test the water, and they were literally going to East Palestine, and then they crashed. And in addition to that, Florida Surgeon General Joseph Ladapo is sounding the alarm about a 4,400, that means a 4,400% increase in the life-threatening conditions reported in what's called the VAERS. This is the, I don't want to say, but the thing in your arm, the VA, ending with seen, adverse event reporting system since the 2021 rollout of the things in your arm for the pandemic. And if you guys didn't know, the system exists because when people get the things in your arm, they go and report the adverse effects in the system. So he's saying that, hey, why isn't anybody talking about the fact that this has exploded 4,400%? Economic news, Japan, which is the third largest economy in the world, saw manufacturing activity contract at its fastest pace in the last 30 years. Remember, they manufacture a ton of things like cars and electronics and all those kind of things. Their export orders as well have decreased since the same level as July 2020. So it tells you a lot about how the economy is actually doing. Singapore, which is another manufacturing hub, their output decreased 2.7% in January on an annualized basis. And the Labor Department said that the number of Americans filing for new claims for unemployment actually dropped by 3,000 people. So that was the number that I was telling you guys before. Corporate news, Home Depot, their shares have plunged over 7% to $295.50. They missed the expectations on the earnings in quarter four, and they're also talking about a slowdown in the future because obviously people don't have any more money to redo their homes and things. Rolls-Royce, if you guys didn't know, they also make engines for airplanes. Their net profit went up by 57%, and they're quoting the 35% increase on the hike of large engine flying hours in civil aerospace. Berkshire Hathaway missed earnings. They went down by 8%. They're saying that it's having to do by the strong dollar in addition to a drop in the profits on the railroads. And in trade news, the G7, which is the countries of Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the UK, and the US, are preparing new sanctions on Russia because of the invasion in Ukraine, targeting key economic sectors and other things that, well, they just want to debilitate. It looks like Russia. Remember, in my opinion, they were the ones that instigated this war due to the fact that they were trying to, I believe it was 2014, they did a coup for the president. They helped overthrow the government. They put their own puppet in, the US, and then now talking about Ukraine joining NATO. Now imagine if Russia went to Mexico, they overthrew the government, put in their own person that was favoring what they wanted, and then they wanted to put a base literally on the border of the United States. I don't think we would like that either. Technology, the Chinese electric maker NIO is planning to build its first battery plant to make big cylindrical cells like Tesla. They're looking to stop their reliance on battery manufacturers like contemporary Amperex Tech. Investment news, Russia's war economy is increasingly geared toward making tanks, missiles, ammunition, and planes. The government budget deficit soared by $25 billion, and soon they're going to have to start passing those costs on to their citizens because they're not going to be able to afford to shield them anymore. Most likely going to be in the form of taxes, which is most likely going to debilitate the economy even more. In other investment news, February 20, there was a power minister in India. They want to try to avoid the blackouts that are, for example, plaguing South Africa. They invoked an emergency rule to produce coal power at maximum capacity, especially for the ones that import the coal from overseas. And they want to be able to run flat out for 3 months to be able to try to avoid the blackouts during the summer season. South Africa, which at one point was one of the most what's the best way to phrase it in English? One of the most up and coming economies in the world. They're having unprecedented level of blackouts. They have literally just rolling blackouts, kind of like Venezuela. And it's ironic because before everything was working just fine in South Africa. And there's a company called Apollo. There's a chief economist called Torsten Slok that stated that there's growing concern among investors that the truthfulness or the honesty about the U.S. economic data is actually the truth. As secondary data or econ data is becoming more reliable, it's causing a lot more volatility in the markets. And I'm sure that some of you guys have been seeing that, especially if you guys trade or in the markets at all. International events, Poland is installing anti-tank barriers to their borders with Belarus. I don't think that they would be doing this if they weren't expecting some kind of activity from Russia. If you guys didn't know, there was I believe it was a previous president. It was one of the higher up guys in Russia that talked about how they needed to move the borders of Russia all the way back, significantly back, for example, with Poland. So they might be getting scared that Russia's going to go after them next. And there was another earthquake in the region of Turkey after those two big ones that killed over 47,000 people, unfortunately. There's an incredible video. I think I'll try to share it with my guys so they can show it here, where the earth, literally the asphalt, was just opening and closing like that. It was something incredible. Italy could have another drought. The Alps in the Italian region have 50% less than the amount of snowfall that they get normally. And the longest river in Italy, called the River Po, has 61% less water than the normal time this year. Venice, which normally has a problem with flooding, they're blaming low tides, but they're saying that due to the low tides, they're not able to ride in gondolas, water taxis, and ambulances in some of the canals. Kind of ironic, right? They've been telling us about rising water levels for so long, and Venice, which is on the ocean, is suffering from low tides, not high tides. Unusual facts: archaeologists discovered 4,500-year-old remains in the lost palace of an ancient Sumerian city in southern Iraq. They used what's called LiDAR equipment, which is kind of like light radar that allows them to beam kind of different lasers from different aerial like helicopters and things like that, and it shows you what's under the ground without having to excavate anything. They've actually found thousands of structures in the Amazon under the actual trees. If you guys want to see a really interesting show about that, look up on Netflix Ancient Apocalypse by Graham Hancock. It's really good. And there was another derailment of a train, a call from Union Pacific in Stanislaus County, California on Monday morning. Luckily, there was nobody injured. That's the news for this week, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Don't forget to subscribe. Hit me with all your questions with Ask Marcello. And we'll see you next week. And remember, the preppers were right.